Hi everyone, this is English 115 Technical Writing, and this is a mini lecture on an introduction to technical writing and ethics from Unit 1. So let's start with what are technical writers, because that's what you're going to be this semester. You're going to become a technical writer. So technical writers communicate technical information to a specific audience, from non-specialist to expert. Technical information refers to information that is not widespread and is known to experts and specialists. So, for example, if your major is HVAC, then as a technical writer, you might explain how a thermostat is set up and works to someone who is not an HVAC specialist, who has never studied HVAC. So to a homeowner, for example, that would be a key example of technical communication. Technical communication is a formal field of study that looks at how to best communicate complex technical information to a particular audience. So you can see how technical writing and technical communication overlap. Really, technical writing is a form of technical communication. In this class, I may refer to what we do as tech writing. I might also refer to it as technical communication. I'm referring to the exact same thing when I do that. So another way to understand technical communication is it's the process of making and sharing technical information in the workplace. It's also a set of applications, the documents you write and the presentations you deliver. So there's two types of technical communication. There's the action of technical communication, and which is a verb, and then the noun of technical communication, which is the things that you actually create. Those documents, reports, memos, charts, instructions, directions, definitions, descriptions, all of those are the applications, the documents that you write. As a technical communicator, you're going to have a couple of different roles. And in this class, the two roles that will be the most important are the writer of a document and an information resource for others, or SME as it's called, subject matter expert. Normally, we would be working in groups. However, in an online environment, that's a lot more challenging. So we're probably not going to be doing much group work, but technical writers do work in a group with a team. Communication skills. These are key, and that is why for the variety of majors that are enrolled in this course, you are enrolled in this course because companies say that communication skills are invaluable. So what I have heard over and over again, and I believe I mentioned this in the introduction, is that the difference between someone who's going to be successful, who's going to own a company, run a company, be a leader, vice president, president of a company, are communication skills. That ability to translate complex materials to a lay audience is really key to becoming successful and climbing the corporate ladder. And beyond that, beyond, let's just say you don't want to own your own company or you don't want to run your own business. Certainly, strong communication skills will make you a valuable employee always. My son is an engineer, and he's a strong writer because his mom's an English teacher, and he is constantly being asked to rewrite documents, instructions, directions, all kinds of things, to review documents that have already been created because he has good, strong communication skills. So again, it's a way to improve your hireability, and it's also a way to grow your career if that's what you choose to do. So some characteristics of technical communication. These are just some general characteristics. It addresses particular readers. We've already talked about that. It has a specific audience. It helps readers solve problems. So it figures something out. Maybe it tells you how to set your thermostat, like I just mentioned, or maybe it tells you the directions for closing Chick-fil-A if you're going to be a closer. It reflects the organization's goals and culture. So the type of communication that you do will reflect the company that you work for and what that company values. It is produced collaboratively. Although we won't do a great deal of collaborative work in this course, primarily because it's online and it's really challenging to get everyone to work together in an online environment. Usually you have a subject matter expert, you have a tech writer, you have the project lead, and at least those three components are going to be involved in creating the document. It uses design to increase readability. We're going to talk about this throughout the semester, but design is really a key component to technical communication, good design, because you want to be able to locate the information that you need quickly and easily. And so because that is a big goal in technical communication, design is really an important component. And it also consists of words or images or both. So for example, I want you to think about if anybody has recently bought a piece of furniture that needed to be put together. You will likely have seen at the very least a combination of words and images, but it's also likely that more and more companies are using only images. And the reason that they do that, use primarily images for directions, is that it reduces costs. It keeps them from having to reproduce those directions in a variety of languages. So in the multi-cultural world that we live in, being able to communicate across cultures is also something that is greatly valued. And images are one fairly relatively easy way that we can do that. So technical communication and design. I'm just going to speak briefly about design. In this unit, we will have an entire unit dedicated to design, but I do want to talk about it because I want you to be aware of it and start paying attention to it at the very beginning of the course. So document design is used for several different reasons. It's used to make the document look attractive and professional. And if you think this makes perfect sense, if you think that our technical communication is representative of the corporation that we work for, we always want to come across or represent our company in a positive manner. So looking professional, clean, making it easy to navigate the document, helping readers understand the document. Those are all elements that are going to bear well on your company. It's going to make your company look good, and it's going to make you look good. It's going to make you look like you've put some effort and energy into what you are creating. So in this unit, we're going to focus on memo format for our document design. There is a video and a template in Unit 1. You will be required to use this template throughout the course. So when I ask for you to create a memo, to submit an assignment in memo format, or to submit a memo to me, you are required to use that memo template. And for some reason, this has been challenging to some students. So that's why I created that little format, or the little video to go along with it, to kind of walk you through the instructions of how to use the template throughout the semester. If it's unclear to you, it doesn't make sense to you, let me know ASAP, because again, this is something that you're going to be graded on your ability to comply with. This is a component of technical communication. It's document design. The only note I want to make about the memo format is that for every company that you work with, they will have their own memo format. So this is the format that we'll use for this course. It doesn't mean that it is the only format that's available or that's out there. It's just one that I use to make it simpler and easier for everyone to adhere to. Document design also includes images, and it's important to understand the purposes of images. As I said earlier, it's a way to communicate to a multicultural audience, but it also makes the document more interesting and appealing. Think, for example, once you look at our textbook, it's not especially appealing. There aren't a lot of images. It is primarily text. So it's not a lot of fun to read. But if you're looking at a website or directions, you expect images. And it's a way to, images are a way to communicate and reinforce difficult concepts. You know that old adage that a picture is worth 1,000 words? Well, this is true in technical communication as well. It can communicate instructions and descriptions of objects and processes, and it can communicate large amount of quantifiable data. So for example, a chart might be able to show you so much more information than you would be able to provide in written format. So let's talk about honest communication. Now I'll end this lecture talking about ethics, but I just want to briefly touch in this introduction about the value of honest technical communication. Simply, it is the ethical thing to do, to communicate information, technical information in an honest manner. And the reasons not to, or what the consequences of being dishonest are that readers can get hurt. For example, someone could be, if your manual on how to use a lawnmower isn't honest and direct and clearly formatted so that the reader can understand it, a reader could get seriously injured. And again, if you are dishonest in your technical communication, you and or your organization could face serious legal charges. In this world that we live in today, litigation is common, and if there is any way that you can be held accountable for an accident that befalls some user, you will be held accountable. So it is always in your best interest to provide the best possible information that you can to your readers. Technical communication needs to be clear. Again, unclear technical communication can be dangerous, and it can also cost a lot of money to the company, to individual readers or users. So it's really important that you are as clear as you possibly can be. And a note about clarity. Usually when we write or we create something, we know what it is we mean to say. And so to us, it is by definition clear. We are not trying to confuse people. We are trying to create clear technical communication. However, it isn't until actual users encounter and interact with that technical communication that we get real feedback about whether or not that communication has been clear. So it's always important to have proofreaders, readers of your work. I would strongly suggest that you have users. When you are completing a complex project, you want to have alpha testing and beta testing. Alpha testing is at the very beginning of the project when you're just kind of getting ideas out there and you want to get feedback. You might solicit feedback from experts. Beta testing is when you want to actually go to the users and you want those users to try to interact with the information, and then you want to question them on their interactions and make sure that they got from the material what it is that you intended. So now we're moving on to chapter 1, which is of your textbook, which is titled Professional Communication. Chapter 1 defines professional communications, or states, from memos to letters, from business proposals to press releases, your written technical communication represents you and your company. Therefore, your goal is to make it clear, concise, and professional. I want to take a minute. I've spoken about clearness, and I want to take a moment to focus on conciseness and professionalness. Concise means short and sweet. One of the big differences between a tech writing course at English 115 and English 112 is that in English 112 you're writing essays and you want to have a lot of description and a lot of details. In technical writing, you only provide those details, those descriptive elements that a reader must have to make sense of the document. So if you can say something or explain something in 5 words, you do not want 15 words. That being said, many of my students think, oh, I can make this really short and sweet. And you can. I want you to do that. One of the things that I will ding you on throughout the semester is wordiness. I will say, get rid of the extra fluff. You don't need it. But you also, being concise is a lot harder than being wordy. It's a lot easier to write 15 words than to cut those 15 words down to the best 5 words that describe or explain something. So don't think that it's easier. Technical communication is easier than writing an essay, but it should be briefer in almost all instances. The next, or the final point of this slide, is professionalism. And with professionalism, comes along with how it looks, document design. But another key component is grammar. People are not going to take you seriously if your grammar, your spelling, you're using the wrong words. If all of those are off, people are going to think at the very best that you didn't take the time and effort to make a document look professional. At the very worst, they'll think that you or the company you work for is dumb or unprofessional. So it's in your best interest to make sure your work is as close to perfection as you possibly can. And to that end, I'm going to be really strict on capitalization, punctuation, all the elements of grammar, all the elements of spelling, all the elements of word usage. I expect the work that you submit to me to be your example of your best possible work. And I want you to think about it as if someone were going to decide whether or not to hire you and base it on the work that you submit. Okay? So I want you to really push up the quality of your work. And again, that's a little bit easier in rather than when you're writing a full essay, because the pieces that you'll be producing in this class are by definition shorter, most of them except for your last project. So they should, by definition, be easy to proofread and review carefully. Okay, so professionalism is a key element of professional and technical communication. Your textbook talks about texting. And while it says texting is used in professional communication, business communication, it is used less frequently in technical communication. So let me take a moment here to kind of clarify the difference between professional and technical. Technical is anything that has to do with specialized knowledge. Professional is your boss texting you to see if you got his email requesting that you create a report on X. Okay, so professional communication is the kinds of communication that you might have with coworkers and employers. And businesses, potential customers, potential clients. But it's not necessarily the same thing as technical communication. Professional communication is kind of a subset of technical communication. So, that being said, when texting is used, it should be used to communicate brief messages that are audience appropriate. By audience appropriate, I mean if you're texting your boss, unless he's using abbreviations like LOL, you don't want to do that, okay? You want to be formal and brief in your texting. Email is another form of communication, and it's probably the most prevalent form of communication in the world today, in businesses or in technical communication. Even documents that we might create, PDFs, for example, reports, might be submitted to readers via email. Okay, so email is key. Your textbook goes over, outlines the tips for effective business emails. They're good tips, and they really align very well with the videos that I have posted in the Get Started section of the course. Those videos really show you what not to do and what to do. You can certainly see from the first email video that that is not an example of professional communication, and that the second email video walks you through those steps from the salutation to the closing and explains them. So between your textbook and those tips and those videos, you should be writing and submitting strong, professional, technical emails. I expect the emails that you submit to me and to your classmates to follow the guidelines in the second video in the Get Started unit, and to follow the guidelines of the email that's listed in your textbook. Okay, again, Netiquette, whoops, let me go, I was getting ahead of myself. Netiquette, know your context. So knowing your context means know who you are talking to. Don't just assume that they communicate in the same way that you do, or that understand the same jargon that you understand, or use language in the ways that you do. The textbook suggests that you familiarize yourself with policies of acceptable use, and I strongly agree with that. However, those of you that work for smaller businesses may not have those. So the following guidelines in your textbook will also help you. Remember the human. Remember that there's a person behind the words. So don't assume the worst. And if something doesn't sound right to you, rather than getting angry and responding angrily, ask questions. That's my follow-up. Or my key to interacting with my colleagues here at Thomas Nelson, as well as my boss. If one of them, my boss included, says something that doesn't sound quite right to me, rather than reacting angrily or getting frustrated, I just ask a question for clarification. Did you mean? Or I'm not sure what you mean when you wrote. Do you want me to? And by asking those kinds of questions, you're going to avoid a lot of back and forth and a lot of anger and misunderstanding. Another key suggestion is avoid flaming. Remember, research before you react. So figure out what's going on. Never, ever, ever, ever respond in anger. If an email you get upsets you, or a text message you get upsets you, stop, think about it, calm yourself down, give yourself some time to process your feelings and emotions, and then respond. Because if you respond angrily, it's just going to get into a back and forth, and nothing's going to get solved. Nothing's going to get resolved. So really take your time. One point that I didn't list up here that is mentioned in your text that is important is recognize that text is permanent. If you send something out to the world, that is there forever. If you don't believe me, you can go to the Wayback Machine online and see examples from when the internet was first begun. And you can find information from years and years and years and years and years ago, 20 years ago, maybe 25. So remember that that text is permanent, that people can print out what you've written, they can copy and paste what you've written. So be careful of the words that you share with the world. Also, respect privacy and original ideas. This is really important, that you make sure that it is clear to your readers what information is yours and what information belongs to someone else that isn't yours. That's just good ethical and professional behavior. A note on this, which kind of ties into all of it, is it's really important not to use your business email for personal interactions. And I'll give you kind of a crazy example of that. Many years ago, there was a faculty member here at Thomas Nelson who was going through a divorce, and Thomas Nelson keeps all of the email from its faculty, and his ex-wife was able to subpoena the emails between him and the woman he was having an affair with. So make sure that you don't put private stuff in an environment that someone can get to. Thomas Nelson, in the email that you send back and forth, your student email, they keep that. They have access to it. That's backed up. So you don't want to put anything in there that could be suspicious or interpreted in a way that would reflect negatively on you. So memos, that's the next section in your textbook. And in memos, they're very similar to an essay in that they have an introduction, a body, and a conclusion. All of these elements appear in a memo, but these elements each have a clear purpose. So your memos should be audience specific. They should always sound professional and have a formal tone. They should be, the subject should be emphasized. So in other words, you don't want to go off track. You don't want to talk about Mary's new dog. You want to stay on the topic at hand. You want to be very direct in your format. And if you look at the memo format that I've given you, you have a purpose section, you have a discussion section, and you have a conclusion section. Your purpose statement or purpose section should always just briefly, in a sentence, state the purpose of the memo. This memo describes the benefits of using Cricket Wireless. Okay? And then the discussion is, it can be one paragraph, but it can be several pages in length. And that's going to be whatever your memo, whatever information you want to convey in your memo to the audience about Cricket Wireless. Maybe you want to explain 3 reasons why we should use Cricket Wireless. Okay? You also want to remain objective. You want to provide information. That's the key with memos. They are informative. They are to provide information. So in your conclusion of your memo, that's the time when you offer suggestions or recommendations. And again, if you're not concluding the memo, you can use the subtitle recommendations. So whatever is most appropriate for the topic of your memo is what I would like you to use for a subtitle there. Okay, whoops, I'm sorry, got to go back, I'm madly clicking. All right, there we go, letters. Letters are the most formal type of business communication that we do, and letters are frequently sent outside an organization, so that by definition they are the most formal, but they also can be construed as legal documents. So for example, you might get a letter that fires you. So it's going to be written very formally. It's going to have a clear heading. And if you look at the textbook, it goes over this quite well. It shows you what a letter should look like. Letters, just like all of the communication that we will do in this class, are left justified and single spaced. Okay, so you need to make sure that you're left justifying your work and you're single spacing it. You will double space between sections. So for example, you've got your letterhead, the sender's return address. You've got 2 spaces, then you've got the date. You've got 2 spaces, and then you've got who the letter is addressed to. 2 spaces, and then who the letter, the salutation, Dear Ms. Blakely. 2 spaces, information. 2 spaces, next paragraph. 2 spaces, sincerely, your signature line, and then below that it's written. So that's the basic outline for a letter. And again, just make sure that you are single spacing and left justifying. Because this is the most formal type of document business communication you will do, your language should always be clear, concise, specific, and respectful. Each word should contribute to your purpose, so you don't want to have a lot of padding in there, a lot of wordiness. Each paragraph should focus on one idea, and the parts of the letter should form a complete message. So you should have a clear beginning, middle, and end in your letters. Okay, so now we're moving on to ethics in technical writing. And just to kind of give you an overview of what I'm talking about when I'm talking about ethics in technical writing. Ethics is the study of the principles of conduct that apply to an individual or group. You have ethical obligations to your employer, to the public, and to the environment. Sometimes that last one confuses people, but and in this changing political environment, that may be less than it has been in the past. I'm not quite sure. But to your employer, when you are communicating in a professional or technical environment, you are ethically obligated to provide the best possible information to your employer. So for example, if you have been asked to do some research, you are ethically obligated to do that research before you report. You can't just make stuff up or provide your best guess. You've been asked to look things up. And failure to do so can result in being fired. Okay? To the public, that kind of links back to what I was saying earlier, in that you need to make sure that the information that you provide to the public is accurate. And if you do not make sure that it is accurate, both you and or your employer can be held legally responsible for any negative impacts. And to the environment. The environment is key because, for example, if you know that your company is dumping toxic waste, this happened a few years back, several years, probably about 15, 20 years ago. Smithfield was dumping toxic waste into the Pagan River, and the Pagan River became terribly, terribly polluted. And the company and several of its employees were held legally responsible because they did not report it. So if an employee knows that his company is doing something illegal and doesn't become a whistleblower, then that person, if it can be proven that that person knew that this indeed was happening, can be held responsible. So with your obligations to your employer, you need to be competent and diligent. You need to be honest and have candor. If something's not going to work, don't say that it's going to work. Tell your employer that it's not going to work. You also have the responsibility to keep information confidential, and to be loyal. It is not appropriate for you to be bad-mouthing your business or company in a public environment. And again, I already told this to you about your ethical obligations to the environment. Make sure that you treat the actual or potential occurrences of environmental damage responsibly. Tell supervisors, because if you tell a supervisor, then you're much less likely to be held accountable. Okay? And you also should, in your own personal interactions with the environment, try to reduce damage whenever and wherever possible. There are also other kinds of ethical obligations, and that's when using materials from another source. And this is much like plagiarizing in writing an essay. You should always abide by the fair use concept, which means that documents, information, what have you, is legally permitted to be used. If it's not, or you're not sure, you should ask permission. You should always cite your sources accurately. Even though this is a technical writing course, you should make sure that that information is, whatever research that you do, is cited correctly. And if you're not sure about who should be the author of a particular document, if you share authorship with others, if it's you, if it should be the first original author and you've edited that author's work, talk about it. Frequently, companies have legal resources available to them. Use them whenever possible. Don't make assumptions, but really think through what's going on and what you can do to make sure that you are meeting your ethical obligations. A key element of ethics is social media, and a lot of us don't really think about that. And here's a quote. For the majority of us, social media is nothing more than a faster way to screw up in front of a larger number of people in a shorter amount of time. And of course, what comes to mind immediately are the tweets that our president sends out frequently that are full of misspellings and misinformation, if not outright lies at times. And that really puts him in a negative light. And so the same thing will happen to you. If you are using social media, you have to be careful as a company representative of how you use it. I strongly suggest that your social media, your personal social media, is kept private from whatever business or company social media you engage in. And when you are using company social media, that you are very careful and thoughtful about your words, how they can be interpreted and misinterpreted, so that you understand that in the social media environment, you are representative of your company, and what you do and what you say can reflect negatively upon both you and your company. Here are some just key suggestions for using social media ethically and legally. Again, keep private social media accounts separate from company. Never post personal stuff in a business environment. Read the terms of service for every service to which you post. Now, if you don't do that in your personal life, that's on you. But if you do it in your company's social realm, that can be on you and your company. So make sure you understand what the expectations, guidelines, and potential issues can be. Avoid revealing unauthorized news or information about your company. If something really great has happened and you want to share it on your business social media, make sure you go through the chain of command to make sure that it's the appropriate time. Sometimes businesses want to have a grand announcement about something and you don't want to undermine that. Don't speak ill about people in your professional social media environment. Just don't. Say nothing. Don't agree or disagree with negative comments. Just avoid them. If you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all. That is really useful in your professional um, communications. Avoid false, oh, I'm sorry, I missed, don't stream or quote from a speech or meeting without permission. Always get permission. I always like to tell people this meeting is being recorded, or I'm going to post the notes of this meeting in this particular place so that people know that their words are being recorded and can respond and react accordingly. Avoid false endorsements. Don't make sure you know what it is you're endorsing. Do your homework. Don't just like something, but find out what that something is that you're liking. Don't impersonate someone else online. That's kind of a no-brainer. Don't pretend to be somebody you aren't. And always respect trademarks and protected logos or names. Again, make sure you've got that trademark logo or trademark symbol if you're ever going to post corporations. So, some basic principles for ethical communication. Abide by the copyright laws. Whatever the copyright law is, follow it. If you don't know what it is, find out. Abide by the appropriate professional code of conduct. If your business or corporation has a social media policy, know what it is. Make sure you're familiar with it so that you are clear on what the expectations are from your company. And always abide by that policy on social media, even though it's tempting not to, and I would say it's even challenging not to in this day and age because we're so used to our own personal interactions with social media and liking something or responding to something that really in a professional and technical environment you need to stop and think about what the consequences are of your response before you post a response, even something as simple and as easy as a like. Just take a second to think about it and think about what the consequences might be. Okay, that concludes this mini lecture. If you have any questions or comments, please post them in the questions and comments format, and I look forward to talking to you again soon.